Hi there guys, so in this video we will be taking a look at the WordPress REST API. What is it and how to use it in your application, plugin or themes. If you have ever used it, you know that it is an interface for applications to interact with WordPress site by sending and receiving data in JSON format. REST in its entirety is a representational state transfer. That is what stands for REST in short. And in WordPress there are a set of additional parameters that have been added that we can use to extend what REST API is basically, and use it in the WordPress way. If you haven't yet familiarized with the REST API logic itself, I will recommend you to go to this page and then take a read at all of this. But I will recommend you to just watch this video throughout, and then you will know what it does and how to use it. Alright, so there will also be another part where we will be extending the REST API, so the default models and collections. So maybe you'd want to subscribe for that and stay tuned for the next video. But I will definitely appreciate a simple gesture like a subscribe. It goes a really long way for me to keep making these videos, right? So let's move on to the secondary part, which we will be taking a look at the authentication in REST API, because REST API REST API in WordPress brings us a lot of options in terms of how you can connect to the REST API functions and methods. Right, so authentication, when the REST API was initially built, it was made on top of the model of cookie authentication. So as you would know that cookies get set when you log into your WordPress account. So if you are building a plugin and you are using a REST API client, say if you have a user who is logged in already to the site, then you can easily have it interact with the site, right? So that's a cookie authentication, and you would want the user to be logged in order to access the site data. So the first is the cookie authentication, which we will take a look in a later part in just a few minutes. And let's take a look at what all other models we have. The secondary being is a newly introduced authentication model, that is application passwords. This has been the standard for many frameworks as of now, but it was recently introduced in WordPress as of 5.6. And this brings us the basic auth RFC 7617, the standard for using REST API with application passwords authentication. And the uses for it is a bit technical, a bit more than you would use a library. Like you would see in cookie authentication, you can simply just use the already built-in library available from WordPress and expect it to work right away. But then in the application password, you'd have to do a bit of manual logic and then have the passwords generated from the user and save it in a token in the DB, and then use that throughout your application life. And there are also these authentication plugins. So one being the basic authentication plugin, which was, I think, was being used way earlier and is not being recommended anymore, as you can see. But there is one more, which is a recent one, that is JSON Web Tokens, which is the standard format again in the web industry. You can use this with the plugin JWT Authentication for WP REST API. This is a plugin by Enrique Chavez, and this again follows the same standards as the application passwords I just mentioned. It just uses the JSON web token format, and you have to set a secret key first and then enable the course if you want that, the course support. And then you would use these two endpoints to first generate a token and then save it in your database, and then same you would use that token throughout your application life to get and set data with REST API, right? So we're not going to get into that how to implement these, But I will definitely make another video on JWT authentication and application passwords, how to use these in WordPress, and basically how to create your application logic with one of these or both of them in a separate video, right? So in authentication, let's first take a look at the cookie authentication, because I think that's the most used authentication in terms of REST API, right? So we have let me show you what I have in my WordPress dev environment. So I have this demo menu page in a custom plugin created, and this has a basic form which has this search term which we'll be using in this demo. And then when we'll say anything here, it will basically use that term and give us the results for it, which will under the hood use the REST API to generate the results, right? So let's take a look at the source code. We are using PHP Storm, and here it is. So it's a Barebone plugin. I have a single file. Excuse me. So this just registers that menu page and as the form as I mentioned, and again the script that we'll be using in this video, that is admin.js, available in the assets. Again, this source code I will also deploy in the GitHub repository I have for tutorials, and I will link it down in the video description. So if you wanna take a look at that, do that. Alright, so let's take a look at this admin.js script. So here it is. We have a very simple script that I have already configured for the basic starter thing that just does what is it adds a dependency of jQuery and the WP API and the WP API fetch. We will take a look at what these all do. So jQuery being that you have already used, if not, you can take a look at that as well. jQuery is as old as it gets, and so I have the ready function set, and where we are using the jQuery and the WP object to first we are getting the form data, the search term which we have here, and the search term is here. If you were to just hit hi, right, and hit submit, you'll see that it is being console logged right now, because that's what the code is for we have. So without wasting further time, let's take a look at the authentication first model, that being the cookie authentication. So let's take a quick reading at this, because cookie authentication is the standard authentication with method included with WordPress. So when you log into your dashboard, this sets up the cookie directly for you. So a plugin and a theme developer needs only to have a logged in user. Alright, so there is also the nonce and CSRF equivalent of authentication, that is the application passwords and the JWT authentication. And the nonces way, that is we'll take a look at that. So alright, so cookie authentication, so as you can see here, it just asks us to do this. So this is nothing but this is just telling us this is how the built-in JavaScript client creates the nonce. Basically this is what under the hood this adding the WP API does, that brings us in the page. So if you were to take a look at console, and you'll see that the global objects we have wp.api available, and then in this WP API we have quite a few functions available and methods. Here you can see collections, endpoints, and all that sort of stuff. We'll take a look at that in a bit. What do I mean by cookie authentication? We just read that, but in totality, how you can use that is by simply adding a script and enqueuing it on the page, and then attaching as an array dependency the WP API, and that will be it. This WP API fetch is a secondary thing that you can use. So this is for a bit of manual uses of the API, and we'll take a look at what is that and how that is done. So in the basic, in all of its entirety, what you just need is the WP API dependency in your script, not even the jQuery, because jQuery is just for convenience I'm using here, right? So here it is. Here we have that. So Let's take a look at the cookie authentication library, which is the backbone JavaScript client. Here it is. So as I mentioned, it is as easy as just enqueuing the WP API or using it as an array dependency. Right, so we have quite a few models here. You can see category, comment, media, page meta, page revision. So these are all the models available by default in WordPress, and the collections. So models being the data store or the schema to use or to used to generate the data for that model. You'd be more familiar with the term CPT in WordPress, so consider them as CPTs. So you would see these like that, and that's about it. And these are your basically taxonomies, as I would like to call it. But yeah, you get the gist, right? So the first things first, what we need to do is loading the client. So if you are using a dev environment like me, you would have script debug set, and when that is set, we get this WP API settings object already localized to us. So let me show you what that is. So WP API settings, and here it is. It is an object with the root, nonce, and version string, and this is basically is what is used under the hood for the backbone JavaScript client to load the API initial data, right? So this uses under the hood these nonce and root and the version string. So what you'd want to do is either set it to true, or I think the most safest way to use is this. That is what the documentation suggests, to use the wp.api.load promise, and then it returns a promise when we call the dot done. So let's see how that is done. What we want to do is use this form. Let's comment it out first, and we will be using WP API.load promise.done. We could have just copied it, but I'm just going to show you how that is done, so you can follow me as well along the way, but I just recommend to watch it. It's not much. So here it is. So we have, let me just remove that because we don't want that right now. All right, so here it is. We have the load promise done, and what this does is basically loads that. If the script debug is not set, this will load the WP API settings regardless, and when that is done, we can basically use the backbone script. Now that is available at wp.api, and then we have all these functions available. Let's take a look at one of them, that being let's take a look at WP API collections, because we want to fetch some data, and that will be collections.posts, and let's just do that. So how you collect or get some data is by, let's get it in a variable. Let's call it posts, or let's just call it response, right? Let's call it a response. And you also want to, in backbone, you always instantiate the objects, right? So you don't want to call the new keyword with the new keyword. So here it is. As you can see, here are some examples, some model examples where it is creating a new post and then getting some collections and all that. So let me show you how this works. So we have in the load promise, we have a response here now, that is the posts. And now what we want to do is, basically this is not yet done because we only have the collections object right now. We haven't yet done anything with it. So what we want to do is, we want to get all the collections. Let's say we want to get all the items in it, and then what we want to do is, we'll do response.fetch, and then when we have this is again, this returns a promise. So if you were to console log this right now, it won't show us the expected results we want. So let's do that. Let me show you what that brings us right now. So here it is an object. Basically it's not even a promise yet, but you can see here it is the response JSON and the response text, but you can't just use it like that. What we want to do is basically we want to use dot then, and then in that we will just say res again. We can say anything, and then in there we can now console.log that response we get, and then in this we will have the data, right? So you can see, note this is some, okay, this is my Grammarly extension. Let me just disable this, and if you go to refresh it now, you'll see that which one, check, what is it, and I just disabled it. I hope so. Yeah, so this is one of those extensions. Sorry about that, just ignore it. And here it is, we have our array, and this returns us an object because all we have is a single post right now, that is the hello world default post, right? So here it is. So as you can see, this is as simple as that. Now let's use that form to gather some data or dynamically load some data. So we will be using that over here, and then in that form data, let's paste our code, cut and paste that, and let's use the search term again in the post, in the collections term, to dynamically use the term, right? So let's do that now. Now if you were to do that, we would get the expected results if we make it work. Correct, let's try it. Let's do for pages now, and let me remove this and hit submit. Alright, as you can see, it just returned us a page for us because all we have is a single page. As you can see, sample page publish, but what if you want to output it here? So let's do that. Let's use that because we have an array. We can simply do this. If you are aware of the map function in JavaScript, it is supported by all browsers as of now, so you can use it without any JS compiler or interpreter, right? So let's get that. Let's call it item, and let's use jQuery again. So we have here in the results, if you want to take a look at the markup, we have demo content, an empty div basically for us to output the data, right? So let's use jQuery, and we'll be using hash demo content, and then we will use prepend because we want to insert data in here, and that will be let's say p, and you want to use interpolation, so you'll use backticks, and let's also use two of the semicolons because of PHP. Right, so let's interpolate. We will use item dot, so I know that already that item dot title dot rendered is an object available in this object for posts and pages at least, right? So let me just come back here, remove it, and then hit posts. Now if you were to see, as you can see, it says hello world. Now let's switch to pages, and you'll see that sample page, right? So this was the way to use that, and let me just quickly look at here. Yeah, so this is all fine, but we can also use the WP API Fetch, which is a much more manual way to do this. But I think, in my opinion, this backbone library is very well maintained. I will not say anything about it, but it is getting old, and the standard way is to still use it, but I have been using the manual way for using the API in the client side. So that will be the API fetch. That's why I have mentioned it. It is not mentioned in the documentation, but let's go through it. So all you need to do is just enqueue this WP API, WP-API fetch, and then you have the API fetch available at WP .API fetch. So let's comment this out. Let's copy this thing. Let's copy this part of the code, and let's comment this out. and then below here we'll be using WP API.fetch. We can simply just say this, and the WP API fetch we will call it in here, right? So all you want to do is basically replace this with the WP API fetch call, because everything else stays the same. We get the form data and the search term, and then we use it, right? So let's comment this out, and what we want to do is we want to call WP API WP.API fetch, and then this takes in an object. So let's give it, so this you would expect it takes the API the same parameters as the fetch API. So we have path, we have the method, and we have headers, and we have data, but for this get call we'll simply use the path. So for this one, this pages and posts. Also, you can take a look at all the models and the collections, how you can use it at the reference. I will link this down in the video description, and you will see all the endpoints available here and what all parameters do they take. As you can see here, date GMT and all that. It is very well documented again. As you can see here, it takes a get request at WP v2 post. So what you want to do is make a request. So don't worry about the site URL, it will take it by default. So WP v2 and posts. So all we want to is do that, because by default there's a pagination built in, so we don't need to worry about that right now, and we don't have any more than a single post to have to worry about the pagination thing. So it again returns a promise. So what you want to do is handle that. We will have say res, and then we will do this here, because now we have the response cite this part, and let's uncomment it, and I will hope it to work. I will expect it to work, but let's see. Again, anything can go wrong, so let's try that now. Pages. Alright, it works. So as you can see, it's as simple as that. There's nothing fancy going on here, but the simple API fetch call, we simply replaced it with from the backbone library to the API fetch, which is a bit more manual way of using it. I think this is also made with backbone under the hood, but then again you are using the fetch API call to get the data, and it is using the cookie authentication under the hood. Right, so we have taken a look at the cookie authentication. There's one more way to use this in the client side app, again with the cookie authentication model, as you would see in WordPress. So I have already implemented that in the Vajra plugin starter I have been making, and it's in beta. So I'm going to show you that right away. I have that GitHub repo open. If you want to check it out, it is available at GitHubs at smalltowndev/Vajra starter plugin. And if you were to go into the source dashboard API/local.js, don't worry, I will link this down in the video description. You will see that you can simply import the API fetch via the @WordPress /API -fetch, and you can install it. It is available as an NPM dependency. So thanks to the WordPress core team, they are basically making all those libraries available as an NPM dependency since the Gutenberg development started, and it is getting more and more refined every day. So you can use it without any worries, and I have been using this in the plugins I had made and I'm making, and this starter uses it under the hood to get and store data via the REST API. This uses this cookie authentication, and it is very easy to use. You don't need to even provide it via the NQ thing I just showed you here, and it will by default be available via the NPM dependency you installed. Don't worry, you can take a look at all the source code via the plugin, and yeah, so that's about it for the cookie authentication. Let's take a look at the application passwords. So I'm not going to get into that how to create the application passwords, but I will simply show you how it uses under the hood to interact with the API. So I have Postman running here under the hood, and I am using the application passwords I have already created. So let me show you. This just uses the authorization with the authorization header set to basic space the okay. So this part right here is interesting because you'd want to see this. So the implementation part for it, let's take a look at it. So as you can see here, it was introduced way back in 5.6, and it has quite a few things to show us and basically help us in terms of using the REST API. The authorization flow is simple. You'd go to the authorized application template, the URL, which is available at via the REST API route URL. So if you were to say WP, so whatever the site URL you have, and this basically is a query parameter I'm using right now, but this is standard for all site URLs. Why I'm saying that is because in WordPress, we have permalinks and the structure is different per permalink option. So you would have pretty permalinks, and in that you can simply use WP JSON, right? The WP-JSON way. But if you were to have a site URL set to the default permalink, that is the post date, I think, and that would require you to use the query parameter, the REST route. And I think it is the safest way to use it because you might not be sure what's the correct way. So just assume it will work for both of the ways, and if you were to hit anything here, you will get a response with the URL and the home, and yeah, so this and all that. So once you have you basically in your application, you will take the input from the user, the site URL, and then you would also need to test beforehand that if the URL input by the user is a WordPress URL or not. So that's why the application passwords is a bit more manual labor for the developers as well. So what you can do is simply look for the URL in response for this route, and then if the URL and the home is available, then you can assume that it is a WordPress site, and you can move on to the next step, which will be to get the authorization and get the application passwords as well, right? So there's also one more way. Okay, so I think I'm getting too deep in this application password, but you get the gist. I will be making another video on this and how to interact with it. But basically what you do in the next call after this is you look into this authentication application passwords endpoints authorization. I get it, it's too long, it's too deep, all right, that's not what I should have said, but then so in this object, you get the URL to authenticate for the application passwords, and then with this you will get your authentication credentials, right? So you will save that in your database and then use that in the authorization header. Now you'll have to use this. Wait, I'll show you. You will have to use a hashing method to basically get the header to work, because it is under the hood username, application username ratio, the password we got. So the username will be the username for the user which used the application to authorize. So yeah, with that said, we have that set under the hood, and you can also manually create the application passwords in your profile by clicking edit profile and then going to here and clicking add new application password, give it a name, and then you'll get the password. Alright, so let's stop that and let's move on to our parameters. So let's try that. Let's try some model here that will be, let's say we want to fetch all the users here. So let's fetch WP-B2 users. I know that already it's a get request, and we're gonna get into here, and let's see. Sorry, here it is. It's a get request. We have all kinds of arguments here: page, per page, search, exclude, but we're not gonna use that. let's say wpv2 users and then hit send. We will have that. As you can see, it just returned us an object because there's no other user than this single admin user in my site right now, and it has everything we need, right? Again, it takes parameters as I said here, and there are few that you can use, but this URL doesn't have much to offer for us in terms of using the parameters. So let's try something else. Let's try the plugins. Plugins. Let's try plugins. We have a few plugins installed here at the moment, so let's try it. We have plugins. Let's first get the plugins data. As you can see here, we have quite a few plugins here. I think 1 2 3 4, yeah, so 4 plugins right now. Okay, so let's say we want to search something, or we want to limit search rules to plugins with the given status, right? So let's do that. Let's provide data status actually. So we want to say alright, so all of our plugins are active at the moment, so let's disable a plugin and then try to fetch that difference, right? Let's disable WP reset because it's not in use right now. Now let's first just get it and then see that what is the status for it. Okay, inactive. So as you can see here, it has everything, but now let's say inactive, and we will expect it to just give us that plugin. As you can see, it just filtered out for that plugin. So this is how easy it is to use these parameters, and you can use these endpoints and routes to basically create posts, pages, and look for all the available look into the all available endpoints and parameters and what they do. This goes way beyond than just this, because you can extend these endpoints and URLs in the WordPress REST API, and that will be I will be exploring that in the next part of this video, and I will hope that you are already subscribed for that video, and I will be dropping out that in the coming weeks, hopefully. That will go into a bit more depth, and will also show you how I am using that in the Vajra starter plugin I'm making, and what benefits does it bring, and some of the pain points that REST API also gives, right? So I think with that being said, this video is complete in its basic mastery of the WordPress REST API. If you are unsure of anything, you can simply go to the using REST API page. I think I have it open somewhere. I don't. Alright, so let's go to this using REST API page, and you will see here the global parameters, the pagination, linking, discovery, and quite a few other things actually. So let's take a look at the global parameters. The global parameters are the parameters available throughout all the endpoints and routes, because this under the hood uses the base of the code for which we use in the WordPress to generate these extended REST API routes, right? So this will be available for all these. So all the feeds you want to get, if you want to create something, and all that, we have an important, I think, field here, that is the embed field, because if you want to embed if you want the embedding links for a certain collection or a model, you'd basically want to set this to true, because this only takes a single parameter, a single type of value, that is the boolean value, and so you can either set it to 1 or don't set it. So when that is set, you will get the embedding links related to that collection model, and you can simply use that. Yeah, and so WordPress REST API also gives us quite a few methods, such as get, post, put, patch, and delete. And some libraries don't support these methods extensively, So it also gives us this parameter option, that is method underscore method, with which you can even make a post request and tell it that it's a delete request, and then it will use that to delete it. Let's try that. Let's actually make a post request and try to delete something. Right, so let's switch it to post and we will say let's completely remove this. There will be v2 posts, not 42, we have one, right? And we are using method to delete, so we want to just delete it. And again, we're making a post request, we're not making a delete request, right? So it is supposed to delete it, right? So we have, let's take a look, it is correct. Okay, yeah, so the post one, so let's hear it. No rest route was found matching the URL. Again, I think I'm doing something wrong here. Rest route, that is correct. Let's, okay, we have that. Where were we? REST API, Google parameters, delete. Method delete would be translated to WP v2 posts, right? So if you go to, I think there's something wrong with this here. WP JSON, WP v2 posts. This will also work as expected, but the method delete, I think we can simply say that here as well. Underscore method, is it? Okay, it's in method delete. You'd want that in caps, don't you? Did that delete it? Alright, yeah, so that worked. I think for some reason that wasn't working in that REST sorry, the query parameter way. So to help fix that, I can also tell you how you can get what route you have available for your basically REST endpoint. So if you want to know if a website has REST API enabled or not, and it has what route it has open for REST API access, you can simply go into our let's go back to our using the REST API page, and then in that you will want to take a look at this discovery page. In this discovery page, this documentation as well verified that it explains it quite a lot, that you can use this link header. So this link tag is always available in a WordPress site, and this will have a relation at https api.wp.org, and you can always check for it. And then the href value it will have is your REST endpoint URL. So first you will basically be checking for the route basically here, like this, or actually not this. You can simply just have a browser a browser or HTML parser running in your client, and then load that page, and it will treat the page, such as, let's just make a get request here for the page, and then you'll see this will treat it as an HTML request, right? And a get request, a browser request. Now we have all the data here, and we will expect it to have the link here somewhere. And alright, so I think we can search, right? Let's search for it. We want to search for this part right here, I think. Yeah, here it is. So as you can see, it is telling us that we have the REST API available at wp-json with the site URL, right? So this is how easy it is to check if the REST API is enabled or not. This will again verify for the site being WordPress or not, and you won't even need to use the route to check or verify it again. So this is for application passwords and how to use it. Again, it is the REST API is actually made to use programmatically, basically. So most times you'd be using it in a client, and the application password way that can be used anywhere with a call request or a fetch request, right? So that's it for this video. I hope it wasn't too long, and I really wanted to tell you or show you guys how to use the REST API. And I have seen many developers not recognize the REST API the respect it deserves, because it has been made and perfected over the years in a way that you can basically use it to almost anything. In terms of interacting with the WordPress site, you can even use it with your Next.js application or your Gatesby application or any headless application to solve your WordPress backend as a backend, as a data store. And this would be very beneficial to you as well, if you are creating a website, you're for a client or an agency who wants the modern part of the web as well, and along with the simplicity of using a framework like WordPress to add it the data, or all that sort of stuff. So the REST API will give you a very good way of interacting with the WordPress backend. And application passwords is a much secure way of using WordPress REST API with any applications out there. So with that being said, I hope this video helped you, and if it did, please subscribe, and if you do, it really means a lot to me. And either ways, it did mean a lot if you have watched it till this part of the video. Hope you are having a great day. Thank you for watching this again. Have a good night. It's night here. Thank you.